I'm doing good. How are you?
Good, good.
Thank you so much for taking out the time to do this.
My
I think
pleasure.
when we spoke earlier as well, and when Professor Pasan must have spoken to you, the objective of doing this podcast is to create role models of the many brilliant women we have in our alumni community. And for people like me, especially because we've just graduated, I think it's inspiring for me, and I'm sure everybody in my batch and the younger ones as well, to hear about stories like yours that kind of lead the way for us, right? Like there's a lot that we can learn from listening to your story and understanding how you got where you are. And yeah, I mean
Right.
that's really it. So I'll just start off with the questions. The first one being, how does an IIMA grad set up a design label? How does that happen?
That was not on your brief.
I like
Okay,
surprises.
so well, actually, it was not really a question of a design label. It was a question of finding what what really was my calling more than anything else. So as you know, I mean, you and all your other batchmates are going through that. You've just finished your studies, and then you have certain expectations from your career. Your parents, your entire family have expectations from your career, and you sort of have this path charted out for you. And that was the path I took. I finished IIM, went to a really good company in Hong Kong, came to France, went to ESSEC, worked in L'Oreal. But somehow I felt that I needed more meaning, and I had it. I was very lucky that I felt that quite early in my life, and not very much later, in which I was lucky enough that I could take the risks. So I had to find my meaning, and I really didn't know what the meaning was. Only that it had to be genuine and heartfelt, and I had to connect with human beings. So after I finished, I was lucky to have that training of being rigorous, analytical, understanding of business from all its angles. And the first thing I saw was there was a big gap for people to buy things for the home which were
Mhm.
connected to artisans. I mean, where there was really a human being behind the product. Everything was so consumerist and so product driven and packaging driven and marketing driven. I really felt there was a real need for people to connect, and this was a long time ago, before the movement became a big time that it
Right.
is now. So and for me, the way I could connect was to talk about the women from where I grew up, which is Assam. And I've been surrounded by these women, and the women from the Northeast are actually very strong, very resilient, and very talented. And I belong to a family of such women, and I felt that that was my strength, and that I had to capitalize on that. And it turned out that I had a knack for colors, designs. So I just put everything together and imagined my own future and set up my company. That's how it happened.
Wow, that's. I think a lot of us think about how you have to really find your passion and find your calling, and it's great to hear that it is possible to do that, because I
It's
think we
possible.
get we get lost in this whole discussion of placements and this is what you need to do. If you've joined a career, you have to stick to that path. But it's good to hear that you can kind of crisscross between working at a corporate and then setting up something of your own and basically doing something that you're passionate about.
Yeah.
So and what's it like? So, as I understand, Jamini, your label, is a lifestyle brand that kind of has its roots in India, right? A lot of what you do is inspired by Indian artisans, and not just Assam now. I think you do kind of cross
Right.
country design
Yes.
projects. So,
Yeah.
how does that work for you? Like coming to India, I'm guessing multiple times a year, working with these artisans, and then creating products that are for a more European market. How
Yeah. So
does
I
that?
think the first step is, you know, um, I actually live. I've been living here now for 22 years, so I'm quite um, at home in France. So most of my inspiration actually comes from the design aspect. Actually, comes from here. So
Hmm.
I go to a lot of museums, look at a lot of books, go to a lot of exhibits, and from there I get ideas about how I would interpret things for the European market using Indian traditional crafts. So it's really it works both ways. I travel a lot in India because I still have a lot of family there. So it's all
Hmm.
connected to travel basically, and this whole need of imagining a space which sort of takes you away from your mundane everyday life. So traveling here, traveling there, and then I try and connect design to craftsmanship. And this is how it works. So when I'm traveling, my eyes are always open. It could be a graffiti on a wall here in Paris. I would like the color combination, or I would like the proportions. And then when I go to India, I really make it a point to visit villages, because I feel
Mhm.
that a lot of genuine traditional craft is from the village, and you don't necessarily see them. I mean, you see the end product sometimes, but sometimes you really have to go and see what people are wearing, what kind of things they have up on their wall, what utensils or what kind of products they use to go fishing, to get new ideas of weaving that they can do, which you would never imagine on textile.
Mm.
So it's really being open to the community, visiting people in their homes, walking around, talking to them. It's really connecting with life, and that I do in both the countries, and that's what brings everything together. So it's not, I don't work in a very focused way and say, okay, I'm going to design a collection. I never work like that. It's more
Yeah.
like, combining what I love about one culture and combining it with the other, thinking about the woman behind it who's actually doing that work, and putting the two together. And I really believe there's a lot of value added in that.
That's interesting that you mentioned the woman behind it. Do you particularly focus on women artisans as well?
I focus a lot on women artisans, because I
Mhm.
really believe that these women, especially in India, I mean, they're so strong and so resilient, and they have so much to give us, so much to
Mm.
contribute. But I feel that economically they've been left behind, financially, patriarchally. I mean, the society sort of
Yeah.
doesn't look at them with respect, or even with a way of saying that, you're as capable
Thanks.
as we are, so let's take from you. So I feel that it's my calling as a woman to focus on that, and I find it very rewarding, because I think Indian women are so smart, really,
Yeah.
really smart. So I just feel very naturally inclined to that. I also work with a lot of men artisans, because the craft that I work with where these men are experts, cannot be
Mm.
replicated anywhere else. So it's really about both. I have no sort of inclination to say I'll work with one or not with the other, but I do try and work with women, because I find that, as I mentioned, they have this inner strength, and this go-getter kind of attitude, because they're not respected enough, or they haven't had the means to do things. And I feel that we have to push them, we have to encourage them, and
Mm.
the results are amazing. So
That's yeah. I mean, you don't hear of a lot of brands actually. Uh, there's one way in which brands do it, which is communicating a story and just talking about the fact that this craft comes from this community. But you're actually going all the way through, right? You're building credibility not just by talking about it and involving the craft, but you're actually using I don't want to say using, but involving the actual artisans to make this for you, which is, I think, I mean, that's a lesson I think brands will just have to keep learning going forward as well, that authenticity as a value is just a lot more important now. So
yeah.
what has your experience been in terms of on the consumer side? I know I'm going a little off script, but this is very interesting. So what's it been like engaging with consumers, right, and telling them about this story that you find, and you're kind of living in two worlds, right? One world is this reality that we have in India, and one world is your consumer world, which is probably a lot better off. And how do the two connect for you?
Well, actually, they connect really well, because as you can imagine, my clients are mostly women, just from the product I make, and they have a need to hear these stories, because
Mm.
at least in Europe, I don't know how it is in other countries in the West, but in Europe, the story about India is focused on poverty, is focused on caste, focused on outsourcing, and focused on IT. I mean,
Mm.
that's the four pillars. When you talk about India, that's one of the four things that people talk about, or the beautiful palaces of Rajasthan. So it's very stereotypical. Unfortunately, that's how it is. All right.
Yeah.
So it's not good or bad. That's just how it is, because that's what the media sells. That's what sells newspapers and magazines, and what people have been seeing. So when you come and tell them about stories of strong women, and and the artists that they are, because they're not just women in some villages. They're artists, and
Yeah.
in it, Europe, people really respect art. I mean, there's something about European culture that says, okay, if you present an artisan not just as a villager who's sitting on a loom, but she's really an artist who has a know-how that you and I don't have, there's immediate respect. So that connection is, created automatically. So there's a very, very big positive value added to that. And the other thing about women is that, especially in the last couple of years with the Me Too movement and everything, people are becoming very sensitive to the status of women in general. So the fact that I've been talking about this for many years before even Me Too was fashionable, or, the right thing to say or to do. Trendy, before it became a trending topic. Jamini's always been talking about the woman behind the craft, her place in the family, her power. So it's been a constant story. People have been able to relate to it, and they find it very relevant, and especially in today's world when people are actually changing their consumer attitudes. They want to do something. They want to feel good about how they consume. They really want. I mean, the primary, I think, even now after COVID, I'm sure you're going to come to that question. Everyone's talking about how to do things that are positive for the planet, how to do things that are positive for the community, for the people they work with, they live with. So anything positive that comes out of a brand right now is extremely attractive, So
yeah, that's I'm sure that's been I'm sure that comes with its own sense of validation as well, that the world has come around to what you're doing.
It's high time. It's high time. It really is. And I think more and more people have a need to feel that what they're doing, how they're spending their money is useful to someone at the end of the chain, or to the planet. So unless brands can really communicate that and prove it, not just using clever AdWords, but prove it and show what you're doing and connect with the people who are the last on the chain. It's just that kind of value added is irreplaceable, actually.
I agree. Yeah, let's see what happens though in the future. But it looks promising, at least if people actually wake up and inculcate
if
this.
you look at the kind of example we are setting for the next two generations, I mean, your generation and my generation, we're sort of already there in us. But think about the next two generations who are going to have to take over all the mess that we are leaving behind. It's you can't close your eyes and say, okay, as long as I'm okay, everyone else is okay. It's not possible. So people are really, really going to have to become conscious about their footprint, and so all this is it's completely in coherence with what we talk about in our discourse.
Great. So, ma'am, just stepping back to your time at IIMA, what's been your how do you think that helped, or did it not help? Because I know you did a degree at ESSEC after that as well. How did that kind of shape your journey so far?
Well, IIMA definitely helped because it taught me to have faith in myself. I mean that's something so important, especially when you say about changing careers and stuff. So it teaches you. I mean, it really taught me to be to ask myself questions, to be a risk taker, because going to IIMA itself was a risk. And it teaches you to question yourself because you're surrounded by the best minds. So when they're questioning you, you constantly question yourself. I think that was the biggest thing that I gained from IIMA. How it helped me in my journey. It taught me to look at a business from every perspective. It really taught me to look at the long-term aspect of what I was thinking of doing, and not just say, okay, this is a great idea, let me jump into it and go. It really taught me to understand where I was placed in the market that is here, what are the different kind of possibilities that people have, how I would be distinguishing my offer from what is available, how that can work in the long term, how people would be, how trends are moving right now. I mean, these are the kind of things I looked at, and I think that if I had just jumped into a project thinking it's a great idea, I would have not been able to get where I am right now. And even the fact that I've been able to keep in touch with the community, it really means a lot to me. I mean, it really does, to understand that people like you, people like Rakesh, see value in this kind of a project, because it's so far removed from 95% of the projects that are talked about. So it's a big thing, and I think that's a really, really positive thing for the next generations to to keep your eyes open. I mean, the whole thing of questioning oneself, of asking yourself really, really tough questions as to why you're doing this, where are you going, is it going to work, how much probability do you think you have that you're going to stick around for the long term and not just give up in a couple of years. So that was the IIMA grounding.
Mm. That's good to hear. For a lot of people who maybe graduate and think about whether this was worth it or not, it's good to know that it's always something that you do value going ahead. Ma'am, just focusing on also how um, now, of course, you've got your own brand, but there must have been those key points in time that kind of, like, um, how do you say it? How a river kind of meanders, right? When it reaches a certain point at the end. What were some of those major points in your life that got you to where you are now?
Couple of things. So I used to work with this big cosmetics brand, right? And I was very happy because it was a great brand. It was L'Oreal, and everything was great. I had very fantastic colleagues, great bosses, the products we were selling. But at the end of the day, when I saw that, we were just selling molecules, you know what I
Mm,
mean? And for just these crazy prices, because I was very disturbed by all that. It didn't make sense to me that we were, in the whole marketing talk of creating this fabulous anti-aging product that would remove all your wrinkles and make you look like Julia Roberts. I mean, I honestly, after a couple of years, I'm like, this is not my cup of tea. It really, people are very happy doing that because it's very creative and very challenging. So I'm not saying that it's not a good thing to do. It was just not my cup of tea. I wanted something more genuine.
mm,
And then I had my child, and I started asking myself these questions about, what kind of an example I wanted to set to them, what kind of world I wanted to wanted them to live in, what kind of message was I going to give to the next generation. And I realized that if I wasn't true to myself, I couldn't in on honesty present something credible to my child.
mm.
And that's when I said, okay, I have to make this shift because this is not something that gives me a lot of satisfaction. And then decided that the younger I was, the easier it was to make the shift.
Yeah.
And that was so it was really a whole lot of questioning about your own about how much um, genuineness you wanted your life to be, in terms of your career, because you
Yeah.
can have a great personal life, but if in your career you feel that you're cheating on something, it's difficult to carry on very long. And I wasn't comfortable with that discourse of saying that, let's make everyone really beautiful by selling you a chemical molecule that's made in a lab. I mean, it wasn't mine.
You said it.
Yeah, it wasn't mine. And but again, it's not a negative thing. It's very personal, and that's how my
Yeah.
journey began, and that's what I convey through my brand today. It's a genuine, it's a human to human connection. It's the real thing,
Mm.
and that's how it started.
And how difficult was it to just decide that you want to do something of your own as opposed to an opposite career? And because I know that you dabbled with some Paris-based brands as well, right? That I'm
Yeah.
guessing were probably in this space of telling
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
genuine
It, it,
story.
it was always in the cosmetics, and because I came from L'Oreal, so it was also in the cosmetics space. Um, it was a little bit difficult, but not too much, because again, because I had my IIM grounding, I was pretty gung ho. I had a lot of confidence, and I had a lot of energy. I mean, incredible amounts of energy. And you just you ask yourself, okay, am I going to do this or not?
Mm,
And I was lucky that I had a lot of friends in the design space in Paris who always told me that I had a very good eye, very good
mm,
sense. So I just jumped right in. I just felt that I have some kind of a gift and a
mhm.
passion, lots of energy, couple of couple of really good friends supporting me in the journey, and I just said I have to jump. That's it.
That's a
So
that's a good thing to keep in mind. Just have to know when to jump.
yeah, you have to know when to jump. I mean, it's not without risks, and you have to be ready to take a lot of hits, because that's how it is when you're an entrepreneur.
Mm,
But yeah, always the long term vision, and once you know that where you want to get, and the rest of it is just they're just hurdles along the way, and you have to be ready for that. You don't get to your um, designated spot inside
yeah.
2 years, and if you do, you're very lucky. So yeah.
Great, ma'am. So, going on to I know we've spoken about how being a woman obviously helps you connect with your consumers better and tell the story of the women artisans that you're focusing on. But speaking as an entrepreneur, what do you think has maybe impacted your journey differently? Is there something that impacts it differently? First, that's the question.
Yeah.
And if yes, what are the things that you hope change?
Well, in the beginning, I mean, I had a lot of credibility issues, especially in India. I mean, going
Wow.
as
Okay.
a
Mm.
boss lady in India is not an easy thing.
Mm.
So because a lot of people who just I was young and they just didn't respect me. They just didn't take me seriously. They wouldn't believe that I was asking them to do all these things and that I would actually hold them to task if they didn't. So I had a lot of respect and credibility issues in the beginning, and it was really not easy because that happened across the region. That happened in Delhi, it happened in Assam. I mean, in India, it's very, very tough to go and work in this space because they're not used to it. They're not used to having women in charge,
Mm.
running a company. It's just it was really hard, so it took me a lot of time, a lot of bad experiences, but finally they understood that I was serious. So but it was also a question of making them understand that you were not just trying to make their life difficult because there was an ego thing going on, but because you were really professional and you expected professional results. So once it took a lot of time to build up that trust, because in the
Mm.
beginning it was just an ego game. So by the time they actually understood that I was serious, that I was keeping my end of the bargain, then things sort of flowing
Yeah.
started flowing a little bit more fluidly. But it took a lot of time. So those were that was one of the big challenges that I faced.
Mm.
Um, Other than that, I do still face very small amounts, but I still do have cases of racism against me
Wow.
in
Mm.
France. So those are very
Mm.
important things, because especially now, as you can see what.
Yeah.
So yes, I did, because I don't know if you're going to ask me that question, because I actually entered a space in France that is full of European designers and European companies. So to
Mm.
have an Indian face come and play in that area, it was not as simple as it might have been. So on the one hand, there was this whole thing about being a woman and finding it difficult to work in the beginning in India. On the other
Yeah.
hand, being Indian and establishing myself in a very, very strong continental European market was
Mm.
not easy either. So I've had
How?
to juggle these
Yeah.
two challenges.
How did the second thing that you mentioned go for you? Like, what are the like? Is it like a blocked off industry and then it takes you time to break through, or what really happens?
Well, I mean, this is actually it's a long history of India being a subcontinent of producing for other brands. So
Mm.
the whole thing of actually selling on your own name as a brand is unheard of, right? I mean, Indians have been making for Dior, Indians have been making for Chanel, but they're the hidden
Yeah.
factory workers at the back. So the Make in India label had no respect, right?
Mm.
It's a French label, so you respect the big designer behind it, but you don't respect the artisans who are actually making the piece. So it was all that kind of stuff. I mean, India was not really on anybody's mind as a spot where you could actually trust the
Mm.
label, you could respect the design
Mm-hmm.
and the creativity. So I've really been probably, if not the first, one of the first people who've come into this space and actually saying that I make in India, I
Wow.
work with Indian people, my products are inspired by India. This is very new. I think people have more they're more used to seeing this kind of a speech from companies in the UK or in the US, but in
Mm.
continental Europe, no. So that took really, that took a lot of time, because when you open a magazine here, you don't see an Indian face in a magazine. It just does not happen, right?
Mm.
So all that kind of stuff took a lot of time, but luckily, I happened to meet a few people who sort of started liking what I did, whether it was the journalists or whether it was people from different business schools and stuff like that. So there was a group of people around me who were very supportive, and that sort of played out right from the beginning, which came to my help. But yeah,
Mm.
but jumping into this space where there is absolutely no precedent,
Yeah.
so that was
So
a really big challenge.
so the one key thing I'm getting out of both the India side and the European side is persistence, right? You have to keep going, and one day you'll make it.
Every second of the day. There's no, I mean, there's no running away from it. There isn't. So that's it. That's the
But
challenge.
that's,
Yeah.
but that's. I mean, I don't know. When you were saying all of this, I kind of had goosebumps. I don't know about anybody else, but because it's kind of awe-inspiring to listen to the fact that it's not just India, right, where you'll face a challenge. You could think that there's a particular challenge maybe that you face in your country right now, but there could be a challenge which is completely something that you don't even realize. I'm not sure how much you anticipated before you started the brand as well, that how much of a challenge is it going to be. But I'm sure you discover some challenges along the way that you never thought would even be challenges. Is this something that you realized in retrospect, or did you sort of know that this would be something you had to face with?
Oh, I knew because I knew the industry a little
Ah,
bit. You know, I had some inkling of how a lot of the people would sort of react because you know, this is France is a very closed society.
mm,
It's a lovely place. I love it here. So there's nothing negative about it. But people are so attached to their culture and they're so proud of their history. I mean, you know
mm,
that, right? When France has a reputation of, even if you come as a tourist, the waiters won't talk to you if you don't speak 3 words of French. And people, I mean, this is a caricature. So if just taking that forward, you can imagine how strong the
effective.
design and textile industry is because they're the leaders in fashion and luxury. You know, I mean, there's so much capital added to this whole French lifestyle
Yeah.
thing. So yeah, it wasn't something that I didn't expect. I did expect it, and I knew that it was not going to be easy to
Mm,
get credibility with my skin color and what I was saying in this market. But the other thing was, you know, because I had sort of worked with these people before. I didn't just come into it as a novice.
mm,
I had sort of worked in the French environment for a big French brand, so
mm,
I understood that mindset. So I knew how to play with it in the sense that I knew what the French really like about India, the really
mm,
positive things. And I always made sure that when I talked about my brand or its inspiration, that those positive things were highlighted every time. So I didn't come
mm,
as somebody who came to disrupt the status quo, but I came as somebody who was, you know, who was bringing in a new idea with a beautiful aesthetic that could make people travel just in the imagination.
mm.
And those kind of things really worked. So people didn't really look at me as competition, but more as somebody, oh wow, what a beautiful way to travel. It became really
Mm.
about, let's go somewhere with Jamini. You know,
Wow.
it's about the imagination, the dream. So it was very important to understand that thing. The French, with, you know, they're very curious people. They're very
Mm.
curious, and they really like to understand culture, women, stories, because they love to talk. So once you understand that and you know which buttons to press, that was the way I decided to go. Yeah.
Lessons there. I mean, the key thing that I'm definitely getting is persistence, and the second thing is knowing your audience,
Yeah.
faults and all, and knowing how to navigate it, because it's not like problems are going to go away. So,
Mm.
and then going on to the biggest problem that everybody is facing now, which is this whole coronavirus gig, which has been sprung upon us. How does that
Right.
impact everything that you've set up right now? Because I'm guessing visits to India, I don't know what the deal is going to be with that now. What happens?
Okay. So there are three very interesting things that have happened. Number one, everybody wants to go local for two
Mm,
reasons. Because you want to help your local industry, which is really suffering, and because you want to reduce your carbon footprint. That
mm,
is really on everyone's mind. So that's the first thing. I'll tell you how I'm dealing with that. The
yeah.
second thing is going digital, which of course you can understand. And that is something which we already, which we had sort of already understood. The third thing, which really worked in our favor, was a lot of people are sitting at home. So the first thing about being local, and I'm not local in the sense that my products are made
Yeah.
many thousands of miles away. So I had to sort of turn the problem on its head and say, you are helping people who are very far away, who are in a situation much worse than you are.
Mm.
So this whole discourse about the artisans and losing their livelihoods and stuff like that, it was very important, but that has always been part of my discourse. So it's not something
Right.
that was seen as being,
Opportunistic.
utilitarian for these times. So, but that was very interesting. So people, even though I'm not a local company, people still see value in purchasing from us because they believe that at the end of the chain, they're going to help someone.
Right.
So that was number one. Number two, the digital aspect was something that I had already started working on because
Mm.
for very simple reasons that our client base is growing more and more across France, across Europe, and we are very lucky in that our products do not have sizes. They're mostly home products, so easy to ship, no returns. During COVID, they were still going into mailboxes, didn't have to have hand to hand exchanges, so we that was a positive thing. And a lot of smaller brands like me had not yet jumped into the digital space. People were still
Right.
really into like physical distribution, wholesaling. The whole model has been very wholesale and physical,
Mm-hmm.
because the creative people don't make that big quantities and they like to keep. So brands who are like my closest competition were not in the digital space at all. It was always
Mm.
about this human. But I had sort of jumped
Experience.
into the digital space because I saw that my clients were actually all over the world. So that really helped. So because really, I mean, we could really switch from one day to the other. Business model completely changed. I went digital, and in fact, our numbers went through the roof during that period. So that was really great because it took some planning last year, but it worked out this year. And the third thing that really worked in our favor was the fact that people were spending a lot of time at home and wanted to do up their home
Mm.
that people never had time to do. So automatically, I mean, just home stuff really flew out of the shelves. So in fact, COVID was difficult in the sense of the practical aspects of managing a business, not having your team at hand, and not having access to delivery systems and stuff like that, all the logistical stuff that one gets hassled with. But
Mm.
we were lucky to be in a space where people were focusing on the home. I mean, just naturally, I mean, imagine you've been stuck at home for 2 months. What do? You're looking at where you live and you think, how about if things just looked a little bit better, because I'm spending more and more time from working at home, having the kids at home, everyone's here, and you just want to make your environment nicer. So that was just benefited us completely. Yeah.
Wow. So demand actually went up. That's great. Congratulations. So
Yeah, that was very.
when you expanding to other continents now because of this?
Let's just
What's
see.
the
Let's just see. Well, digital model is working really nice in Europe right now. The US, looking at what's going on right now, no one really wants to. I don't want to touch that whole thing with the barge pole, but it will happen definitely at some
mm,
time. Yeah.
great. Thank you so much, ma'am. This has been great. And I'm sure people will really learn. I mean, two things I'm taking away definitely is the fact that you have to know when to jump. And the second thing is persistence. Even if you know there are issues that you might face, like you went into it knowingly,
Yeah.
and that requires guts. I mean, if I were to put it in the colloquial Indian sense, you need to have the guts to kind of go ahead and forge your way through. So thank you so much for sharing your story, and
Thank
this
you
has been
very
great.
much.